Македонските евроинтеграции во политичко статус-кво ќе имали брзо решение со Софија. За германската поддршка, патот на Македонија кон Европската унија, американската црна листа во ова издание на Европат. Останете со нас. Professor Edward Џозеф, first of all, thank you for your time today. And
Milo mi je.
Drago mi je i mene. You're coming directly from Brussels.
Yes.
You were at the headquarters of NATO. What was happening there? Why?
Yes, well, I'll tell you first, we had the honor of meeting directly with newly named Deputy Secretary General Radmila Šekarinska. So this was really a great honor, and I would say a pleasure to see Deputy Secretary General Šekarinska, of course we know as Radmila, to see her in that important function already thoroughly engaged. And we were there discussing our report. This is a report, and these are recommendations to NATO from youth leaders in the region, including from here. So from North Macedonia, Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Albania. All six are represented, and these are their recommendations of what NATO can do to stabilize this region and advance it. And I was very pleased that the U.S. mission to NATO invited all of us to come to NATO headquarters and brief NATO officials, and it was there we met also Deputy Secretary General Šekarinska.
You said about the stabilization. I can ask you, do you think that there is any kind of possibility for destabilization of the country? I'm asking you this because there were a lot of messages here, also from the Prime Minister, that he was in contact, that the government was in contact with strategical partners, and the situation is stable. But there were also letters from Dewey about the law of languages, and etc.
Okay. In terms of North Macedonia, I certainly hope and expect and see that this is a stable country, a NATO ally. There's no reason for some instability, destabilization. There's absolutely no reason for that. But NATO should be concerned, and the EU is certainly concerned about the situation in your neighbor, Kosovo, with Serbia, with this recent, as Kaja Kallas, the new EU foreign minister effectively, she called a terrorist attack. The US has called it this horrible attack. This was November 29th. This attack on the water system in Kosovo, a clear attempt to show the capacity to have serious damage. This was something like 20 kilos of explosives, and put in a place where only real experts know how to do this, to handle these explosives. So last year you had Banska up there. You know, there's threats constantly in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Republika Srpska. So the region has not done well. It has not done well since the Russian invasion, when it should have done well. So there's reasons to be concerned about your neighbors, but I certainly don't see Macedonian instability, not at all.
Okay, we will move on the main subject maybe these days, American blacklist. Two names are on that list. Between them, the former first Deputy Prime Minister Artan Grubi.
Yes.
How do you analyze the recent events?
Okay, look, on the one hand, this is a correct move by the United States. And I think that we see that it was a correct move by the reaction from Dewey. It was very interesting, the reaction from Dewey. Was they said we respect the decision. This is very unusual. Normally in this situation, they become defensive, and a political party will be very defensive and say, no, why did you do that? That's no. And they don't do that. And Dewey restates how important the relationship is with the United States, and they even mention about the fight against corruption. So we can already see that this was a move that's been accepted by the political party of Artan Grubi there, who has himself, he said he will pull back. So clearly this was a justified move, okay? So a correct move, one, to show a signal that the United States is aware, and the United States is not interested in tolerating this type of brazen corruption and in terms of the relations with our country. So that's number one. What's not good is that the United States still needs to take this and have to have this certain spisak, blacklist. That's a disappointment that the U.S. has to do this, and as Ambassador Aguilar said, the evidence is here. There's not that this is some evidence that only the United States has. The evidence can be found. And of course, when we talk about corruption, it's not confined to one political party or one ethnic group. This is across the political spectrum, across ethno-national spectrum, and it's a problem that the Macedonian government needs to tackle, and its courts need to tackle.
So you think that maybe this was a message to Dewey, who were 20 years of power, and they were always somehow relying on American support, message to them and to all political parties?
I think it's a message to everyone, yes. I think it's clearly a message, it's individualized, and I think it's a message that the U.S. is aware of the realities in this country, that's not blind here. So that's the first, that no one is being fooled, no one is blind, and it's a symbol of expectations, of the expectations that this government, the Vimro-led, the Mickoski government, will be serious about tackling these things. And let me tell you, I had the honor to host Prime Minister Mickoski at my university, at Johns Hopkins SAIS in Washington in July. This was on the eve of the NATO summit. And it was really basically his first public event in our country. And I asked him on the question of corruption, I said, why not have a clear statement and a gesture that your voters, the citizens of this country, will understand, and reverse the changes to the criminal code that were made in September 2023. That these changes to the criminal code that basically protected some of these high officials very seriously suspected of corruption. And so I still think that that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. It's not interfering in the court system. It's an opportunity for the government, for the parliament, to make those changes, and I hope that the government will do that and the parliament will do that.
Yes. You mentioned Prime Minister Mickoski and the new government. At the same time, you have new President Trump.
Yes.
Can we expect maybe political support in solving from the Trump's administration, if we have in mind that our new political government has ties with Trump's administration, they had meetings and etc., to solving the issue with Sofia, maybe some kind of pressure on Sofia, because we are still stuck on the negotiation process with the European Union, and our government refuses to for the constitutional changes to happen without guarantees that Bulgaria will not block again.
Yeah. First, I would say that the concerns that the government has and that Macedonian citizens have about the making changes and then having more demands, they're understandable. They're understandable, okay? At the same time, it's very important, in part because of corruption, to open these finally, after such delay, unfair delay, that is not your fault, not the fault of this country and not the fault of the previous government, but really the fact that Bulgaria has exploited this situation. So I have the sympathy and the understanding for how people feel in this country about this problem. And I believe you're right that the United States can play a constructive role. And I have long advocated, even for the previous administration. I wrote articles in Foreign Policy, in our own review, SICE review, about how the U.S. can itself advance and protect the Macedonian identity from these attacks and create even a deterrent, a way to discourage Bulgaria from trying to then make further demands and further demands and further demands. So yes, the answer is I do believe the United States does have a role, can play in doing this, deterring Bulgaria, in providing reassurance here, and also individual EU states can also do this. Now, will Trump do this? No one can say that. I cannot make a prediction, but if there are some channels that the government has, they should use the channels, and they should try to activate the government. I was in an event in September when former Bulgarian Prime Minister Petkov appeared. He was there with Mike Pompeo. And so, look, I think there are people in Washington who understand that this is a serious problem. And I think that the United States can play a constructive role.
Do you think that they need to negotiate, to talk with our government, with Sofia politicians, or to wait political government there? Because they have unstable political situation.
Yes.
But the attitude on Macedonian questions for all of them is the same.
Yes, I understand. It's a good question, a very important question. Look, you have complete opposite situation. You have a very stable government now with a strong majority in parliament, and they have chaos. They have repeated political chaos. So it's very difficult to imagine a Bulgarian government now that's going to agree to something. This is why I talk about the role of the United States and the role of individual EU capitals. They can do things unilaterally. They can provide assurances unilaterally, even whatever Bulgaria does. I wrote about this again in these two articles. The U.S. can affirm unilaterally the Macedonian identity. The U.S. can, even within the State Department, has historical archives and that it could explore with Macedonian Historical Commission, and that these would be to the detriment of Bulgaria and its historical approach. And the U.S. could be saying, exploring these type of options as a way to signal to Bulgaria that, sorry, there are limits. There are limits to what you can do. And so there are these assurances. That's why I say the U.S. has a constructive role to play, to do things unilaterally that the U.S. can do for the Macedonian government, not necessarily involving directly Bulgaria.
Professor, if we move on the bigger political, geopolitical scene and situation, there is a new American President Trump, there is new administration in European Union, new Commission, new European Council, new people, new Euro Parliament,
Yes.
war in Ukraine
Yes.
and Western Balkans
Yeah.
waiting in front of the door. How do you see the big picture?
Well, I'll tell you, some of those changes are encouraging. I was just in Brussels, as I told you. I was at NATO headquarters again. I was also at the EU. I had a meeting with Miroslav Lajčák, the
Yes,
party.
he was here yesterday.
Yes, and who was just here as well. And I think the fact that you have a new EU foreign minister, there's essentially high representative, but foreign minister, in Kaja Kallas, I think this is a very positive step. You have someone who is from Estonia, who's a frontline state with Russia, who understands the threat that Russia represents and that Russian proxies represent, and Russian affiliated countries represent. We know Serbia has a very close relationship with Russia. Serbia hosts Russia Today. Serbia hosts Sputnik. We know that Serbian media has a big presence here, that there's a lot of disinformation that comes into this country. That's what we're talking here at this conference about. So I think it's a very positive thing for your country and for the region that you have Kaja Kallas there. Now, what will happen in the war in Ukraine? We don't know. That obviously the Trump administration wants to have a fast end, but Vladimir Putin, who brought his country and Ukraine into a catastrophe for Russia as well. He is dreaming of victory, but he should be careful because he saw what happened with Bashar Assad in Syria, who went down like this. And I tell you, I was very surprised to read an account where Alexander Vučić just stated to the media, he said, "I am not Bashar Assad." I thought this was a very striking and maybe revealing type of remark to even be thinking
about
that he in some way is thinking of himself in this way. I think is very revealing, but it should be a reminder that these type of states that seem so strong, these autocracies like this, actually have a very weak understructure and that they can collapse very quickly. Whereas democracies can look inefficient and difficult and messy, but they have a wide ring of legitimacy.
Амбасадорке Штајнакер, најпрво ви благодарам за денешниот разговор. Вие сте во Скопје, но бевте и амбасадорка, германска амбасадорка во Македонија. Разбирате македонски, така што...
Разбирам, само слабо зборувам.
Така, значи можеме интервјуто да го водиме и на македонски јазик.
И енглески.
Така. Но интересно е тоа што вие всушност бевте и заменик амбасадор во Софија. Со оглед на моменталната ситуација во која што се наоѓа земјата, во политичко, во европско
статус... На што мислите, на Бугарија или на Македонија?
На Бугарија. И на Бугарија и на Македонија. Ја познавате многу добро политичката сцена и во Бугарија и во Македонија. Дали гледате дека набрзо може да има било какво решение за деблокада на евроинтеграциите?
Actually, I'm now a retired diplomat, working indeed for the Southeast Europe Association as a vice president and also to some degree for nature conservation with the Foundation Euronature, also a German organization. So I'm following what is going on here in the region, also in Bulgaria, but of course I cannot give a political relevant answer. But as I see the situation in Bulgaria, indeed it is in a deep trouble. We have had several elections, no government, and there is the next election very soon. So there is actually nobody to take a serious decision. And also Bulgaria holds the view now, because now the change of constitution, which is expected from Northern Macedonia, is also requested from the European Union itself. So they say it's not us demanding from your country to change the constitution, but it is a precondition for the EU to open the EU accession negotiations. At least open, maybe not, because there was some kind of a formal opening, but to bring them to a successful end. This is a very political issue now, and I think it was wrong from the very beginning. Also the former blockade by Greece, or now Croatia wrote a letter to Montenegro saying you have to fulfill this and this and this and this before we will agree to your accession to the European Union, and this is a Pandora box which cannot end, and it is up to the EU actually as an organization to solve this problem. They have to say there are many, I know, members of the European Parliament, but even in the Commission, people who think that burdening the EU accession process with bilateral problems is wrong. But I hope that the EU will come to they have to solve this problem. I cannot say this, the one is wrong and the one is right, because it's a complex problem behind it. We know there are questions of identity and historic claims, etc., which I personally think are awful because they have nothing to do with the EU accession process. But we cannot change the situation except the EU itself, and that, therefore I hope a little bit. The Polish presidency is coming and they are very reasonable, and we have a new commission which knows that EU enlargement is absolutely necessary, but that nevertheless this region and also your country have to be prepared for accession. And my view, the main problem is rule of law, chapter 22, 23 and 24, and perhaps also to some degree chapter 27, which is everything with environment and therefore with climate change. These are huge challenges ahead of all Western Balkan countries which want to join the EU, and I personally wish they will join it very quickly.
Ги спомнавте уставните измени, тие се условот во заклучоците и преговарачката рамка за старт, официјалниот старт на преговорите со ЕУ, но новата македонска влада одбива да ги спроведе. Имаше одреден предлог за уставни измени со одложено дејство. Меѓутоа, од друга страна, се бара одреден вид на гаранција дека Бугарија нема да го искористи понатаму процесот на преговори на сега Северна Македонија за да ја блокира на секој чекор во преговорите поради билатерални прашања и проблеми. Дали и каде може да се добијат тие гаранции?
I fully understand in this respect the Macedonian government, and but this is something which I, as a former diplomat, I must say, cannot answer. I think it's once again up to the EU. There is a huge organization, there are institutions, there are very experienced people, and they should sit down with you and with Bulgaria and find a solution to this. And because Bulgaria says now, yes, it's not a bilateral problem because it's a precondition from the EU, as organization, these constitutional changes, and so it is up to the EU. They have the responsibility. Ask the EU ambassador here, ask the Commission, ask the European Parliament and say, hi, there is a problem and we want these guarantees, which I personally understand, and you have to solve it.
Ако се вратиме години наназад, вие бевте и дипломат тука, меѓутоа земјата чека веќе 20 години, тропа на европската врата. Кој потврли, каде ја гледате вината? Во ЕУ или кај нас дома?
Šta vi mislite voje?
Where do you see the blame? In the European Union or in our country and the governments here? Because we are waiting like 20 years.
Yes, I think it is unfair that you have been waiting for so long, of course. I absolutely think Macedonia needed a completely different approach from the European Union, but that is what real politics are. Life is not fair. Some people get very ill without having done anything wrong, and then they have to solve these problems. And the same is with North Macedonia, then Fyrom. It was not your fault. You were just at the wrong time in the wrong place, and that now you are faced with these huge problems for your progress in the EU accession. And once again, I would say it is mainly a task for the EU institutions, the EU as an organization, to help you to overcome these problems which come from outside. That is very clear, and I was also, and I still am, very disappointed about the weak performance of the EU.
Дали сметате дека можеби Германија можеше да направи повеќе за земјата во поглед на евроинтеграциите? Ве прашувам со оглед на тоа дека Може би тука сите надежи некако беа вперени кон Германија во тоа време и канцеларката Меркел, меѓутоа токму во тој момент Бугарија го стави ветото. Ве прашувам ова затоа што сведоци сме на тоа дека во ЕУ проблемите се решаваат најмногу со политичка волја, токму тоа се случи и со Орбан, па и со кафето и со Украина.
Exactly. Now so many new problems have arisen since the time when Bulgaria started, I would say, to block the accession process, in addition to all the blockages from before. I don't know what the new German government will do. You know, we have elections for the next 2 months. We will be busy, Germany will be busy with this. And certainly, although EU enlargement is now again on the top of the problems to be solved, it will not be the first one. And we do not know what will happen until then. We will have a new American president. We have wars in the Middle East, but in particular also the war in Ukraine. We do not know how this will succeed. And so I think politicians are running after the problems which are arising. I'm pretty sure that the ambassador here, the German ambassador now, that she will do her utmost to remind also the new German government that there is a problem and that this problem has to be solved. And that if we want EU integration, we have to be sincere. Either we mean it or we don't mean it. I personally see the main problem of EU integration in the EU itself, because the whole EU system will have to change. You see, I cannot imagine, I love Montenegro, I was in Montenegro, I have friends in Montenegro, but I cannot imagine that Montenegro gets a commissioner and gets 1 vote in the system. So the voting system has to be changed. And there are proposals on the table for all this, but when will it start? When will it be done? And then also my personal view is that particularly Germany and France, and I hope that this will be the case after the elections, will be closer together to solve these problems, despite their own internal problems. You see, the whole system is shaken. We live in a time of really a deep, deep, deep crisis. And I personally can only hope that the EU, which is really the European organization, will be strong enough, will have people, representatives who are strong enough to see this and do not forget your country, which deserves more than any other in the Western Balkans to go ahead with EU accession. And that is my personal wish. I hope really to see progress, but we have to solve problems, and we cannot do it in the very how do you say langsam? I don't know. Spori na vašem jeziku. We have to do it fast. We have to do it fast. And I hope there are enough people, and that's why you should address those in charge. For now, the new commissioner, the Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Kallas. And I think they are aware that they bear a responsibility. And I have some trust in them that they understand better maybe than their predecessors what is at stake. Because at stake is the stability of the whole region.
Yes. Последните брифинзи од Брисел беа дека токму Германија и Франција имаат иницијатива и зад затворени врати дека работат на решение, на брзо решение помеѓу Скопје и Софија. Амбасадорке, вие сте денеска тука на голема конференција во однос на човековите права. Во контекст на ова, дали сметате дека земјата е подготвена на реформски план на патот кон да биде членка и да влезе во европското семејство?
I would like to praise Civil because I have been knowing it for many years. When I came here in 2011, I immediately met Jabir Derala and met his organization, which developed very well over the many years and contributed considerably to the civil society development in your country, to rule of law, and the crucial issue with rule of law is a crucial issue. And I hope that your government will understand that. They have to solve these problems. There is a government, it's an elected government, and they cannot expect that they can get support from the civil society, and they should themselves support civil society or give them the space to do their work. But it is mainly up to the government now to do everything they can do to fulfill the conditions for EU accession. I would like to mention that also chapter 27, which is about environment and nature. And this is of utmost importance. It's the most, besides 23 and 24, which is more or less rule of law, it is the most complex chapter in the EU accession process. It will be of utmost importance in view of the climate change. We are all affected by climate change, but a southern country like yours is more affected by climate change than many others. And I very much hope that this government, which is still pretty new, that all the politicians understand these challenges and will tackle them. And I think there is enough support, also from Germany, also from the EU, and they have to make use of this support. And I would like to see Macedonia together with the other, North Macedonia together with the other 5 EU Western Balkan countries to be in the EU. Let's not be too optimistic, but at least by 2035.
Гледавте Европат. Останете со програмата на телевизија 24.